In the days before man was lost, a strange light appeared in the sky. It was a soft, pulsating globe of multicolored light that sent beams of luminescence throughout the skies of Earth. The sphere of light hung in the air, seemingly just out of hand's reach. Some thought this light was a sign of things to come, but Ezekiel knew it to be the beams of hope. His only concern was that hope was going to go supernova. Was this the case, or was he simply being touched by the beams of hope themselves? During his frequent sojourns into the outside world, Ezekiel began to notice that man was beginning to lose their humanity, their freedom to live free. It seemed he was the only one who had been given this glimpse of the loss of humanity. He was alone, and in his sadness he heard voices, the voices of those in pain who have lost their faith in themselves, the universe, and their connection to it. Living atop the mountain called Peaceful Reflection, Ezekiel scanned the people below. All he wanted was someone to share his vision with, but all he saw was the differences between them and himself. This produced in Ezekiel a profound sense of melancholy that would not go away. Being of later years, Ezekiel had become a wise and learned man. He had lived his life in a good and honest way, where he had been true to himself. Now it seemed as if his faith was being questioned. How could the last bearer of hope live in a world that was hopeless? After a time, Ezekiel no longer made his trips into the valley, as all of his time was spent on peaceful reflection. The wind, the only ears that could hear his communion, was his single audience. This is the story of how hope was lost and how it can be found. For if you climb the mountain of peaceful reflection and listen closely, you may hear the words of Ezekiel carried on the winds of hope.
Well done, Ezekiel.
Yeah, I know, I agree.
Mountain of peaceful reflection. That's a really beautiful image.
Yeah, I like that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah. And so you're not sure if that means that you were Ezekiel in a past life?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is not the only time that it's come up, because it's come up a few other times, and at least one other person I know of has mentioned that she saw that around me as well. And so I kind of asked her, are you a reincarnation of the person, or do you just pick up the vibration of that echo of the person in the collective consciousness?
Yeah, we can be picking up collective unconscious stuff all the time. I believe that we're not a repetition of a soul, but we may be a continuation of a soul, which means that we come in with the next, soul shaping means really expanding, the soul expanding its consciousness towards wholeness through lessons and experiences in each lifetime. And so you may well be threaded back to that soul, but at the next stage in that soul's journey. So you would incorporate that soul's experiences, but also have some unique path to walk that goes beyond that soul's consciousness in this lifetime.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah, that's my lens anyway.
I often thought that we are not the sum of our parts. We're far more.
Oh, yeah, well, if you believe in an advancing soul, now, not everybody does. And I do, you know. And I've had experiences, particularly with a love experience I wrote about in Chapter 8, where there was no question I knew that soul before. There was absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty grounded, pragmatic person. You can't fool me too easily. And it was absolute certainty. I don't even question this anymore.
Yeah, same here. When I had that dream of those 7 people, and then the next day I go and meet the people I just dreamt of, you can't get more validation than that.
Well, yeah, but in a material culture that's still vibrating on survivalist levels, where all that matters is practicality, these nuanced ideas of things, not only from a judgment place, but from a vibrational place, become ungrounded flights of fancy that we want to disconnect from. They don't serve us in our daily consciousness if our consciousness is oriented towards our basic survival and so forth. If the world moves in the direction that I believe that it will, we'll begin to interact with these experiences like we interact now with money. It's part of our continuous consciousness, and I think then we won't go from having that kind of an experience to judging it, disconnecting from it, and wondering, right? Because you had said a little earlier, just a little while ago in the show, that you sometimes aren't sure whether the soul, is going on, or whether you're connecting back and can possibly have been here at a previous time. Mm-hmm. But that dream definitely suggests there's a whole lot more going on here than what meets the eye normally. We come into remembering, and then we come out of remembering, and I think then we're summoned back by a dream that says, "Hey, hello, there's a bigger picture here." And hopefully, as more and more people vibrate around this kind of stuff, we'll just get more saturated in it, and we'll stop questioning it, and then we can really probably go to the next level with it,
Yeah, and I mean, that's, I think why it's so important that I can't think of a more important work that someone can do than to evolve.
Yeah, it's like I had this interaction like earlier in the summer. I have this whole scene happen with my brother and drugs and his drug problem, and I spoke to Ram Dass, the spiritual teacher, because I'd interview him for this doc I did, and we talked about that, and I said, like, I feel like I want to kind of hold back myself and just devote myself to saving my brother, And he said in that he had a stroke, so he talks very slowly, but it's very resonant the way he talks. It's very connected, and he's really in his heart, and he said, the most that you can do for all of us is to advance or evolve your own soul. I'd heard that before, but something in the way that he said it, it felt like he really knew what he was talking about. Because not only do you advance yourself, but you do upframe the experience of the collective unconscious when you start to make a break for inner freedom and go to the next level, I think.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole premise of sending out those ripples. And I mean, it's like I tell a lot of people why I like doing radio, because I think there's more to radio waves than we believe. And just what we're talking about here today and what we talk about here on the show every week is being sent out on those radio waves. And it's being sent not just around this earth, but it's going out into space, and it's touching the rest of the universe.
And some dude in Thailand is asleep in a hammock down on a beach right now, and he's hearing this on some deep level without even knowing it.
Yeah, I've never met Ram Dass, but I've listened to a lot of his works and read a lot. And we talked about Ram Dass a lot, and love most of what he's done. I think he's a very special human being, and I hope he's doing as well as he can do.
Doing a lot better. I mean, even even when he wasn't doing so well, he was still powerhouse that he is, swimming with one arm in the ocean every morning.
Sweet.
Really quite inspiring. He's a believer.
Yeah, that's true.
He wants to stick around.
That to me was a saving grace in disguise for him to have that stroke.
Well, he says he was, stroked by his guru. It was a fierce grace, he calls it.
Yeah, the fierce grace, right?
And I do believe that it brought him back into his body. He said that he was getting out of his body sometimes, as a lot of people on the Eastern trip do, and I think it forced him to connect his spirituality in with his physical body and his emotional body. When I, interviewed him for the doc versus when I had heard his tapes of him when he was younger, I felt a lot like he was more deeply here now. He wrote a Be Here Now, and I had asked him this by his own admission, maybe because he wasn't here now. It was so attractive to him, and now he's here. The universe made that happen, and I think on some level he's probably grateful for it.
Again, there's no better walk than to walk in the present.
Well, whatever it is, enlightenment don't mean nothing to me, because if it's all about the light, to me it's about enrealment. It's about just getting here in every respect. That's the highest form of consciousness in my view, because you're here in every way, and if you're not here, you're not here. You're not here. You're not in your life. As uncomfortable as it is to be here, it seems to me it's the only path if you want to actually be in your life.
Yeah.
How do we get there is the question. And hopefully the world starts to set up vibrationally so that we don't need to suffer that much in order to get here. We don't need the hard lessons. We can just walk in that direction piece by piece.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in that. Yes, maybe a little suffrage we can learn from, but we don't always need to learn from suffering.
No, it's true, but because I think the collective unconscious is vibrating at such a basic level still, where we're still gripped by terror and all the rest of it, even though we seem in Western culture to have our basic needs met, a lot of us, I still think that vibration is there. You hear a noise, you turn around and wonder, you're afraid. It's still in us deeply. It still feels like an unsafe world. And I think that as a result of that, we need harsh experiences, harsh wake-down calls. And as we start to move in the direction of a safer world that's vibrating higher up on Maslow's hierarchy as a culture, hopefully then joy becomes the path that teaches us what we need to
Yeah. I have a little thing, I don't know, it's not really a mantra, but just a little tidbit that I kind of go by, and I try and keep fear as far away as possible. And the three children of fear that I call shame, guilt, and blame.
Yeah.
And I always say, I don't do guilt, I don't do shame, and I won't do blame.
Right.
Can't
well,
guilt
if you
me or
reach
shame.
the point where you don't do shame, you're way ahead of most of us, I'll tell you that, because I think that's one of the biggest problems we're all confronted with. Anyway, setting the intention is wonderful.
Intent is the foundation.
It's huge. It's huge. You can step on the right path for the wrong reasons. You've stepped on the wrong path.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We just touched on some of the basics of the first few chapters of your book. There's so much more. So for people who want to have a good read. Really check out this book. It's really an inspiring book, Soulshaping. It's an amazing book. What is the soul shadow?
Soul shadows are, I mean, it's almost, sounds almost too shadowy, the word. I was played with that for a while, but it's just signs of our innate image that appear in our lives. So, for example, you might be at a drumming workshop and have some flash or image of yourself as a lawyer, for example. And that would be like a shadow that's kind of calling out to you, and that's trying to remind you of what your true path is supposed to be in this lifetime. Another example might be you're involved in a relationship with somebody and you're making love, and then you have a glimpse of some other individual who's somebody who you're supposed to walk with in this lifetime. That would be an example of a soul shadow. Reminders of our callings that are cast by our soul throughout our lives.
I want to say there's a couple more things here I want to get to. This one by Helen Keller is awesome. Security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of humans as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing.
Helen Keller can say it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Certainly we can live it.
I like that, yes.
This whole adventuring thing, which happened a little later in my journey, was, I mean, it isn't for the faint of heart, but what do you got to lose?
It's just so important to live what you are.
And to be fearless about it. It's like Rumi says, when you see a boogeyman in the graveyard, run at it. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's the path.
And I mean, sometimes you got to be ruthless on your journey of spirit. You have to have that sense of ruthlessness to rush at that boogeyman.
No, you do. And to cut away friends that don't serve you, and to accept that people will come and go and there will be losses, and you have to accept that. The learning is over. You have to move on to the next stage in your journey. You have to let go of things. You have to cut them out, separate out essence from everything artificial. It is a ruthless path. I think that's really true. You may disconnect from your family. It may feel terrible, but you know that in order to get to the next place, that's what you had to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much more we could have touched on. Damn. But sometimes, 2 hours just isn't enough.
Yeah, this has been great. I really enjoyed this.
I'm glad. Like I say.
So relaxed. I like your style a lot.
Try and make it just like we're sitting down having a cup of tea.
Yeah, well, why not, right? We get more real that way.
I think that's the most important thing is that. So for you right now, what's going on for you at this moment?
We're doing a lot. The book is really flying, and we're trying to organize a more traditional distribution system. I had turned down an offer from Namaste last summer and really wanted to bring this book through on my own terms. And now I'm going to add a traditional distribution system. And I had an experience with Slim, the homeless guy, the other day, where he started to sell my book and lit up like a Christmas tree. He sold, I think, 11 books in one day, and now is suddenly dreaming about actually having a home and a life again. So I'm actually thinking very seriously about developing a system so homeless or people on the fringes can actually bring this book into the world and make around $10 a book off it and start to improve their lives again. I mean, it benefits the readers who resonate with the book. It benefits them. I feel wonderful about it. So that seems to be my focus lately. But we're also expanding the website. There's a lot happening around the book.
Cool. I keep thinking back to, I had a guest on a number of years ago, Dr. Albert Taylor, who worked for NASA for years, and he wrote this book, Soul Traveler. It was just interesting how he went to a book signing once. This is one of his stories. He went to this book signing, and he said there was only 3 people at this book signing. This is in the beginning, just after he wrote the book. He quit his job at NASA and wrote this book about lucid dreaming. And, he wasn't getting anything out of it, right? But he knew that was his purpose. And he went to this book signing. There's 3 people, and then halfway through it, one of the 3 people had to get up and leave. But she said, "Can I have your number so I can call you later?" He said, "Sure." So she ended up calling him. She happened to end up being a publisher, and got him on published, and ended up being on the New York Times bestselling list.
Yeah, that's what happens.
You just never know.
Yeah, I mean, the networking is, you don't know who's sitting in the audience, and we don't know who's listening to the show, and I've had amazing experiences the last few months. This book has just really its official release date really is until May, and it's just been published from the end of November. It's just one thing leads to another. It's pretty mesmerizing. Yeah,
I think we were bound to meet in Cyberville. And
part of my innate image, George.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this morning to share your sacred space with our sacred space.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And that was Jeff Brown, the author of Soulshaping, Adventures in Self-Creation.